The stench of rot clung to the air like an invisible shroud as the group moved cautiously through the abandoned city streets. Mason led the way, his shotgun raised, scanning every shadow for movement. Behind him, Riley gripped her crowbar with white-knuckled intensity, while Ethan carried their last bag of supplies. "Stay close," Mason whispered. "We don't know who's watching." It wasn't just the undead they had to worry about. Other survivors, desperate ones, were just as dangerous. They had learned the hard way. 2 days ago, they had lost Jonah when he insisted they help a lone survivor. The woman had turned on them, leading them straight into a group of raiders. Jonah didn't make it out alive. Since then, trust had been in short supply. As they reached an alleyway between two looted stores, Mason held up a fist, signaling for them to stop. He knelt and examined the ground. Footprints. Fresh. Someone had passed through here recently. "Keep quiet," he murmured, eyes darting toward the fire escape above. It was too risky to stay out in the open. Riley tapped Ethan's shoulder. "What do you think? Safe house or another death trap?" Ethan exhaled sharply. "We've got nowhere else to go." Mason nodded. "We check it. But if anything feels wrong, we're out." The three climbed the fire escape cautiously, stepping onto the roof of the old convenience store. The door leading inside was ajar. A bad sign. Mason peered in first. The darkened interior smelled of stale blood and rotting food. "I don't like this," Riley muttered. "Neither do I," Mason admitted. Then they heard it. A faint rustling sound, like fabric brushing against metal. Someone was inside. Mason signaled for silence, then crept forward. He barely took 3 steps before the floor creaked under his weight. The sound of hurried movement came from the next room. A door slammed shut. "Someone's here," Ethan whispered. Mason raised his shotgun. "We find out who." They advanced slowly, stepping over broken glass and debris. The hallway led to a back room. The door was locked. Riley placed her ear against it. "I hear breathing," she mouthed. Mason didn't hesitate. He nodded to Ethan, who stepped back, then kicked the door open. Inside, a figure scrambled to the corner, hands raised in surrender. A young woman, no older than 20, with dirt-smeared cheeks and fear in her wide, brown eyes. "Please," she gasped. "Don't shoot." Mason kept the gun trained on her. "Who are you?" The woman swallowed hard. "Lena. I was just hiding. I swear, I'm alone." Riley crossed her arms. "That's what the last one said." Lena shook her head frantically. "I'm not like them. I needed a place to stay. Please." Mason exchanged a glance with Ethan. She looked terrified. Starving. But so had the woman who betrayed them before. Ethan sighed. "We can't just leave her." Riley scoffed. "Why not? She could be working with someone. Setting us up." Lena's eyes darted between them. "I'm not. I swear." Mason hesitated. Taking her in was a risk. But leaving her could mean condemning her to death. Then. A loud bang echoed from outside. "Shit!" Riley hissed. Mason moved to the window. A group of figures moved in the distance, at least 5 of them. Not zombies. Survivors. Armed. And heading straight for the building. Lena's face went pale. "They found me." Mason turned sharply. "You knew they were coming?" Lena looked down, ashamed. I stole from them." Riley clenched her jaw. "So you led them straight to us?" A tense silence filled the room. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Mason exhaled. They had two options, run or fight. And worse, he wasn't sure if the real danger was outside. Or already inside with them. We saw people with you, Lena. Tell them to come out, or this ends ugly. Mason clenched his jaw. That changed things. The raiders knew they weren't alone. A direct escape would be suicide. Lena backed away, shaking her head. I didn't mean to. Riley stepped forward, gripping her crowbar. You led them straight to us. Enough, Mason cut in. Fighting won't help. We need a plan. Ethan moved toward the back. We can still take the roof. If we go now. A gunshot cracked through the night. A bullet shattered the window, sending shards flying. Not happening, Mason said. They've got us pinned. Outside, the leader of the raiders, his voice rough and confident, spoke again. Tick-tock, Lena. Open that door, and maybe we let you live. Lena turned pale. They won't. They're lying. Mason believed her. He'd seen this before, false promises to lure survivors into a trap. We need to make them think we're still inside, he said. Buy us time. Riley smirked. I like where this is going. Ethan grabbed a pile of old blankets and propped them near the broken window to create shadows, silhouettes that looked like people crouching. Mason gestured toward the back. There's another way out. The alley. But they'll have someone watching it, Ethan warned. That's why we make them come to us first, Mason replied. Riley nodded, gripping her crowbar. Time to make some noise. Mason gave her the go-ahead, and she slammed the metal against the wall, once, twice, loud enough to echo into the night. The raiders took the bait. They're holed up inside. Move in. Footsteps pounded against the pavement. Shadows moved toward the front entrance. Mason didn't hesitate. Go. Now. They slipped through the back door, moving low. The alley stretched before them, partially lit, mostly quiet. But quiet didn't mean safe. Stick to the walls, Mason whispered. No sudden moves. They had just cleared the doorway when... Wait. Lena gasped. Too late. A figure stepped from the shadows, gun aimed at Mason's head. Going somewhere? The man was tall, his face half hidden beneath a hood. His grip on the pistol was firm, steady, he wasn't just some scavenger. He was a hunter. Mason raised his hands slowly. You don't want to do this, he said. The raider smirked. Yeah, I think I do. Behind Mason, Riley tightened her grip on the crowbar, but before she could move, two more figures emerged. Drop your weapons, the first man ordered. Mason's heart pounded. They had walked right into a trap. And worse, Lena wasn't looking at the raiders. She was looking at one of them. Like she knew him. The man tilted his head. You should have never run, Lena. Lena swallowed hard. Mason realized the truth a second too late. This wasn't just about stolen supplies. This was personal. And that meant they weren't just targets. They were prey. To be continued. Mason's grip on his shotgun tightened, but he knew better than to make a move. 3 guns were pointed at them. Any wrong step meant death. The raider in front, the one Lena clearly recognized, smirked as he stepped closer. His pistol stayed trained on Mason's head. You really thought you could run forever, Lena? Lena swallowed hard. Luke, please. You don't have to do this. Luke. So, this was someone from her past. Mason's mind raced. Had Lena really stolen from them, or was there more to the story? Riley took a slow step forward, her crowbar still in hand. You sure you want to shoot? A gunshot will bring every rotter in a 2-block radius. Luke's smirk didn't fade. That's the plan. Either you come with us, or we let the dead take you. Makes no difference to me. Mason's stomach twisted. These weren't just scavengers. They were killers. Lena exhaled shakily. If I go with you, will you let them go? Mason snapped his head toward her. What? No way. Riley's eyes widened. Lena, don't be stupid. Luke chuckled. See? Your new friends don't care about you. But I do. Ethan tensed beside Mason. This is bad. Mason knew it too. Lena was scared enough to do something reckless. And reckless people got others killed. Lena hesitated. Just, promise me, Luke. Promise you'll let them go. Luke sighed dramatically. Fine. You come quietly, and I promise I won't kill them. Something about the way he said it made Mason's skin crawl. Lena took a step forward. Mason grabbed her wrist. Lena, don't. Her eyes were filled with guilt. It's my fault you're in this mess. Yeah, it is, Riley snapped. But giving yourself up won't fix it. Lena wrenched free and walked toward Luke. The moment she was close, he grabbed her roughly and yanked her behind him. Smart girl, he muttered. Mason's gut screamed trap. Then Luke gave a little nod. A fourth raider stepped from the darkness behind them, one they hadn't seen. Ethan barely had time to turn before the butt of a rifle slammed into his head. He crumpled to the ground. Shit. Mason lunged, but a gunshot fired into the air. Luke said, wagging a finger. Wouldn't want my finger to slip. Riley gritted her teeth. You said you'd let us go. Luke smiled. No, I said I wouldn't kill you. He turned to the fourth raider. Tie them up. Mason's mind raced. They had no weapons, no backup. Ethan was barely conscious. They were completely trapped. And the worst part? Lena had just walked willingly into the arms of people who never planned to let her go. And they were all about to pay for it. Mason's wrists burned as the rough rope cut into his skin. His arms were tied behind his back, just like Riley's and Ethan's. They sat against the cold concrete floor of an abandoned warehouse, their weapons stripped away. Lena stood beside Luke, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Ethan groaned, still recovering from the blow to his head. Riley sat tense, her eyes burning with fury. Mason knew they were in deep trouble. Luke leaned against a crate, arms folded, watching them with amusement. You're probably wondering what happens next. Mason didn't respond. He wasn't going to give this bastard the satisfaction. Luke sighed. Here's the deal. You guys are lucky. We could have killed you already, but we're feeling generous. Yeah, right, Riley muttered. Luke smirked. Thing is, my group is running low on supplies. And you? You're about to be real useful. Mason's jaw clenched. You want us to get supplies for you? Luke shrugged. Something like that. See, there's an old military checkpoint a few blocks from here. Locked up tight, but we know there's food, ammo, even medical gear inside. Riley scoffed. Then why haven't you taken it yet? Luke's smile faded. Because it's crawling with rotters. And I'm not about to risk my people when I've got you instead. Ethan groaned. So, you're sending us on a suicide mission. Call it an opportunity, Luke said. You clear the checkpoint, bring back the goods, and maybe we let you go. Mason narrowed his eyes. Maybe? Luke grinned. Depends on my mood. Riley spat on the ground. Go to hell. Luke chuckled. Already there, sweetheart. Then his eyes flickered to Lena. Keep an eye on them. Lena stiffened. What? You got us into this mess, Luke said. Make yourself useful. Mason watched carefully. There was hesitation in Lena's face, uncertainty. Was she regretting this? Luke gestured for the other raiders to follow him. Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. As the footsteps faded, silence settled between the four of them. Mason looked at Lena. Why? She hugged herself. I didn't have a choice. Bullshit, Riley snapped. You sold us out. Lena flinched. They were going to kill me. And now they're going to kill us, Ethan muttered. Mason exhaled. Lena, you have a choice. Help us get out of here. Lena hesitated. I can't. You can, Mason insisted. You just have to decide whose side you're really on. Lena swallowed hard. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. Riley sighed. We're screwed, aren't we? Mason didn't answer. Because he knew trust was a dangerous thing. And right now, Lena held their lives in her hands. The warehouse was silent except for the occasional distant groan of the undead outside. Mason sat still, watching Lena as she paced near the entrance, arms crossed, deep in thought. Riley tugged at her restraints, frustration clear on her face. We need to get out of here now. Ethan, still recovering from the hit to his head, muttered, unless you've got a knife hidden somewhere, we're stuck. Mason wasn't so sure. Lena wasn't like the others. She was hesitant, conflicted. He could see it in the way she refused to meet their eyes. Lena, he said, his voice calm but firm. She stopped pacing, her gaze flickering to him. You know Luke's not letting us go after this, right? Lena's jaw tightened. You don't know that. Mason shook his head. I do. We bring back the supplies, and then what? He's not just going to let us walk away. He can't risk it. Riley leaned forward. They're going to kill us, Lena. And you know it. Lena bit her lip, uncertainty in her eyes. Mason pressed on. Help us escape. You can come with us. Lena flinched at that. I can't. Riley scoffed. Of course you can't. You chose them. Lena turned sharply. You don't understand what Luke is capable of. Ethan sighed. We've survived worse. Lena's eyes darkened. No. You haven't. Mason could see she was breaking. He needed to push further. Then prove it, he said. If Luke is as bad as you say, help us before he decides we're not useful anymore. Lena hesitated, then exhaled sharply. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small knife. Turn around, she muttered. Riley blinked. You're actually... Before I change my mind, Lena whispered. One by one, she cut their ropes. As soon as Mason's hands were free, he rubbed his wrists and gave her a nod. Good call. Ethan stretched, wincing. Okay, now what? That front door is a no-go. Mason glanced at the upper windows. We take the roof. Get out before they notice we're gone. Lena looked uneasy. If they catch us. They won't, Mason assured her. They moved quickly, staying low. Mason led the way up a rusted ladder to the roof access. The door creaked as he pushed it open. The cold night air hit them as they emerged onto the rooftop. Below, the city stretched in eerie silence, dotted with wandering corpses. We jump to the next building, Mason said, pointing to the adjacent rooftop. It wasn't a long gap, but it wasn't exactly safe either. Riley peered over the edge. Great. We either escape or break our legs trying. Ethan gave a weak smile. Better than getting shot. Mason went first. He took a few steps back, ran forward, and leapt. He landed hard but steady. "Go," he whispered. Ethan followed, barely making it across. Riley jumped next, rolling as she hit the rooftop. Lena hesitated. Mason gestured. "Come on." She backed up, took a breath, then ran. The second her feet left the ground, the door behind her burst open. "Hey!" Luke's voice. Lena hit the edge of the rooftop, scrambling. Mason lunged, grabbing her wrist before she could fall. "Got you," he grunted, pulling her up. Gunfire cracked. Bullets sparked against the concrete. "Run!" Riley shouted. They sprinted across the rooftop as more raiders poured out onto the warehouse. Luke's furious voice rang through the night. "They won't get far. Find them." Mason knew this wasn't over. They had escaped. But the hunt had just begun. The city was a maze of shadows and death. Mason led the group across the rooftops, their breaths ragged from the escape. Below, the streets were littered with shambling corpses, their hollow moans blending with the distant sounds of Luke's men shouting orders. "They're spreading out," Ethan whispered, glancing behind them. "We need to get off the rooftops before they cut us off." Mason nodded. "Agreed. But we can't go back down the way we came." Lena hugged herself, her face pale. "Luke won't stop. He'll hunt us until. Then we'll make sure he doesn't get the chance," Riley snapped, eyes burning with anger. Mason scanned the area. A fire escape led down into a narrow alley. The metal rungs looked unstable, but it was their best option. "Down there," he said, moving toward the ladder. "One at a time." Riley went first, moving quickly. Ethan followed, wincing as his feet hit the ground. Mason helped Lena next, making sure she didn't hesitate too long. As he was about to climb down himself, a gunshot cracked through the night. The bullet whizzed past his head, shattering a nearby pipe. "Shit!" Mason ducked, spotting movement on a rooftop across from them. A raider was lining up another shot. "They've got a sniper," he shouted. More gunfire erupted. Bullets ricocheted off the walls as Mason dropped down the last few rungs, landing hard. "We have to move," Riley yelled. They sprinted through the alley, their footsteps splashing through puddles of filth. Behind them, the sniper's shots kept coming, but they were moving too fast for him to get a clean hit. Mason led them through a side street, dodging abandoned cars and avoiding the undead. They turned a corner, and stopped dead. A group of at least 10 zombies blocked the way. "Go around," Ethan shouted. "No time." Mason gritted his teeth. "We fight." The first zombie lunged. Mason slammed his knife into its skull, yanking it free just in time to dodge another. Riley swung her crowbar, crushing a skull with a sickening crunch. Lena hesitated, fear in her eyes. "Lena, move!" Mason shouted. A zombie lunged for her, she barely managed to duck. At the last second, Ethan tackled it to the ground, stabbing wildly. They fought through the horde, but more were closing in. The noise had drawn them like moths to a flame. "We're getting surrounded," Riley yelled. Mason saw their only chance, an abandoned storefront with shattered windows. Inside. Now. They barreled through, shoving debris behind them to block the entrance. The undead slammed against the glass, their moans growing louder. For a moment, the group stood there, catching their breath. Then a slow clap echoed from the darkness inside the store. Mason turned sharply. A figure stepped from the shadows. Not a raider. Not a zombie. But someone very much alive. And armed. "You sure know how to make an entrance," the stranger said with a smirk, raising a pistol. "Now, why don't you tell me why I shouldn't put a bullet in each of you right now?" Mason exhaled sharply. Because of course, their night wasn't over yet. Mason's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he took in the man standing before them. The stranger was tall, lean, with a thick jacket and a pistol aimed directly at Mason's chest. His face was calm, almost amused, like he'd been expecting them. Riley gritted her teeth. Great. Another lunatic with a gun. The man chuckled. Lunatic? No. Just careful. His eyes flicked over their ragged group. You look like you've been running from something, or someone. Mason kept his hands where the man could see them. We don't want trouble. The stranger smirked. Yeah. Well, trouble has a way of finding people like you. Ethan shifted uneasily. Look, man, we're just passing through. The stranger cut him off. See, that's the problem. You're not just passing through. You're being hunted. Lena tensed. How do you know that? The man gestured toward the broken window. Because I saw your little rooftop chase. And now? You've led your friends right into my home. Mason's stomach twisted. This was bad. The store wasn't just some abandoned shelter, this guy lived here. And what happens now? Mason asked carefully. The stranger shrugged. That depends. Riley scoffed. On what? Whether or not you decide to kill us? The man grinned. Bingo. Tension thickened the air. Mason knew they couldn't take another fight, not in their condition. And the last thing they needed was more enemies. Mason took a risk. Look, we didn't mean to intrude. But if you help us, we'll make it worth your while. The stranger raised an eyebrow. Help you? Why would I do that? Mason hesitated. Then he played his only card. Because the guy's after us? They're well armed. If we work together, we can take them out before they come knocking on your door. The man's smirk faded. He considered Mason's words, eyes narrowing. Lena whispered, Mason, are you sure about this? Mason ignored her. He needed to keep the stranger engaged. The man exhaled. Humph. You've got guts, I'll give you that. He lowered his pistol slightly but didn't put it away. Name's Cole. Mason nodded. Mason. That's Riley, Ethan, and Lena. Cole glanced at Lena. You're the reason they're after you, aren't you? Lena looked away, ashamed. Cole smirked. Figures. Riley crossed her arms. So, what's it gonna be, Cole? You helping us or not? Cole sighed, then holstered his gun. Fine. I'll help. But don't think I'm doing this out of kindness. I just don't like uninvited guests in my city. Mason exhaled in relief. Then we have a deal. Cole grinned. Yeah. But first, let's set a little trap for our friends. Mason's eyes darkened. Luke was coming. And this time, they weren't running. The plan was simple, lure Luke's raiders into a kill zone and take them out before they had a chance to retaliate. But Mason knew things rarely went according to plan. Cole led them to the upper floor of a nearby apartment complex, overlooking the main street. The building was half collapsed, abandoned long ago. From here, they had a clear view of the roads below. They'll come through here, Cole said, pointing to an intersection filled with wrecked cars. We create a bottleneck, force them into a trap. Mason nodded. And if they don't take the bait? Cole smirked. Then we improvise. Riley loaded her pistol. Let's just hope they're dumb enough. Lena, who had been quiet the entire time, finally spoke. What if we don't have to fight them? Mason turned to her, frowning. What are you talking about? Lena hesitated. Luke. I know him. I could reason with him. Ethan scoffed. You still think there's a chance he'll let us go? Lena met Mason's gaze. What if I turn myself in? Buy you all time to escape? Riley swore under her breath. Absolutely not. Cole chuckled. Now that's a terrible idea. But hey, if you want to get yourself killed, I won't stop you. Mason's stomach twisted. He wanted to believe Lena had good intentions, but trust was dangerous in this world. And if she still thought Luke could be reasoned with, then she was a liability. Before he could say anything, the sound of engines rumbled in the distance. They're coming, Cole muttered, grabbing his rifle. Mason peered through the broken window. 2 trucks rolled into the intersection, headlights cutting through the darkness. At least 8 raiders stepped out, weapons ready. Luke was in the front. He looked angry. Mason's grip tightened on his shotgun. Everyone in position. But before they could execute the plan, Lena bolted. What the hell? Riley hissed. Mason's heart dropped as Lena ran out onto the street, hands raised. The raiders immediately trained their weapons on her. Lena. Mason hissed. Luke's face twisted in amusement. Well, well. Look who finally grew a spine. Lena took a shaky breath. Luke, let them go. This fight isn't worth it. Luke laughed. Oh, Lena. Sweet, stupid Lena. Mason cursed. He knew how this would end. Lena, get down, he shouted. Too late. Luke pulled his pistol. The gunshot echoed through the street. Lena gasped, staggering backward. Blood bloomed across her stomach. Mason's world slowed. No. Riley fired first. The bullet tore through one of the raiders. Chaos erupted. Cole picked off 2 men with precise shots. Ethan tossed a Molotov, engulfing one of the trucks in flames. Mason, rage consuming him, charged down the stairs, firing wildly. By the time he reached Lena, she was on the ground, coughing blood. Luke stood over her, gun still smoking. He turned to Mason with a smirk. She really thought I'd forgive her, he mused. Mason raised his shotgun. Boom. Luke's body flew back as Mason's shot ripped through his chest. The fight ended quickly after that. The remaining raiders fled into the night, their leader dead. Mason dropped to his knees beside Lena. She was shaking, her breathing shallow. I tried. Mason grabbed her hand. You shouldn't have. She gave him a weak smile. At least, you're safe now. Her fingers went limp. Mason closed his eyes as the weight of it all crashed down. The fight was over. But trust? Trust had cost them everything. The end.